The night the Islamabad peace talks collapsed, Pakistan launched 24 fighter jets, not as a show of force, not as a drill, as a shield. Iran's foreign minister and parliament speaker were flying home, and Tehran believed Israel was going to kill them mid-air. Pakistan put its air force between Iran's diplomats and an Israeli strike-flying AWACS surveillance aircraft, extending the escort beyond Pakistani airspace into Iranian skies. Both men, Abbas Araghi and Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, were on Israel's active strike list. Pakistan went directly to Washington and demanded their names be removed. The argument wasn't diplomatic courtesy. It was surgical. Kill these two, and there is nobody left on Iran's side with the authority to sign anything that ends this war. Subscribe right now, because what you are about to hear is not what any headline gave you. And drop a comment at the end. The question the script lands on is one worth arguing about. A security source described what happened inside the Iranian delegation the moment the talks ended without a deal. When the talks failed, the Iranians were wary that things had not gone right. It was their suspicion that they might be targeted. Pakistan didn't hold a meeting about it. It scrambled JF-17s and F-16s and flew Iran's negotiators home alive. That single operation, quiet, unannounced, buried in a Reuters report most outlets ignored, is the move that flipped the geometry of this war. Not a press conference, not a sanctions package. Pakistan physically inserted its military between Iran's diplomats and Israeli air power. And in doing so, it became something no country in this conflict had managed to become. Irreplaceable to both sides simultaneously. But Pakistan didn't build this leverage overnight. Go back to September 17, 2025. In Riyadh, Pakistan signed the most consequential defense commitment it had entered into in decades, the Strategic Mutual Defense Agreement with Saudi Arabia. Its central clause: any aggression against either country shall be considered aggression against both. First time Pakistan had ever signed anything like it. The timing of that signature is the part most analysis skipped over. On September 9, 2025, Israeli warplanes struck Doha, the first Israeli attack on a Gulf Cooperation Council state in history. Every Gulf capital went into a different kind of fear that day. 8 days later, Pakistan signed the Saudi Pact. That is not a coincidence sitting in a calendar. That is Pakistan reading a map that was being redrawn in real time and moving before anyone else did. The legal language inside the pact was modeled on NATO's Article 5, attack one, attack both. Analysts initially cautioned it wasn't an automatic military trigger. That caveat aged poorly. Iran has been hitting Gulf states with ballistic missiles and Shahed drones throughout this war. The clause has live targets now, not hypothetical ones. The man behind that pact, the one who drove it, flew to Riyadh to sign it, and received the King Abdulaziz Medal afterward, is Field Marshal Asim Munir, Pakistan's army chief. And since November 2025, its first ever Chief of Defense Forces, holding unified command over every branch of Pakistan's military, including its nuclear strategic division. No term limit, no election, lifetime immunity from prosecution. Munir's channel to Trump didn't come from diplomacy. It came from a delivery. Pakistan arrested the alleged perpetrator of the 2021 Abbey Gate bombing, the Kabul attack that killed 13 American service members. That moved Trump in a way nothing else had. Then came the 4-day India-Pakistan war in May 2025. It ended in a ceasefire Trump claimed credit for publicly, and Pakistan confirmed. A direct personal line between Munir and the White House opened that no Pakistani civilian government had ever held. 4 days after the Islamabad talks collapsed, Munir flew to Tehran and sat across from Ghalibaf, the same man his Air Force had just escorted home under fighter cover. Absorb that for a moment. The man potentially running covert operational cooperation with U.S. forces against Iran flew into Tehran and held a direct meeting with Iran's senior leadership. Both sides let it happen. Both sides needed it to happen. That is not neutrality. That is something that doesn't have a clean name. In conventional geopolitics, strategic analysts examining open source evidence, procurement data, and operational patterns assessed a moderate to high probability that Pakistan has been providing covert support to U.S. military efforts against Iran, running beneath its official position of neutrality, not a confirmed intelligence disclosure, a pattern-based assessment built from what Pakistan has, what the U.S. needs, and what neither side has been willing to explain. The most explosive piece of that assessment: Pakistani maritime surveillance data on Iranian naval vessels, including IRGC ships, potentially being passed to U.S. forces for targeting. If that holds, Pakistan isn't a neutral host. Under international law, it is a co-belligerent. Iran demonstrated in January 2024 that it will strike inside Pakistani territory when it feels provoked. A confirmed version of this wouldn't stay quiet for long. Pakistan's 909-kilometer border with Iran, running through an already volatile Balochistan, would become a second front before Islamabad could respond. The neutral mask is not spin. It is the load-bearing structure of the entire arrangement. The U.S. cannot acknowledge Pakistani support without collapsing Pakistan's value as a channel Iran trusts. Pakistan cannot confirm it without detonating sectarian violence domestically in a country with one of the world's largest Shia populations. So both sides maintain the fiction. Both sides need the fiction maintained. When the Saudi pact was signed, retired Pakistani Brigadier General Feroz Khan put the risk on record with precision. Pakistan will need to be very, very careful not to rattle its geopolitical sweet spot with China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the US if this draws India and Israel closer, brings further sanctions to Pakistan's ballistic missile program, and fuels India's efforts to isolate Islamabad. It might end up as a strategic blunder. He said that before a single bomb had dropped on Iran, the Islamabad talks on April 11th and 12th ran for 21 hours, 3 rounds. The first round was indirect. The US and Iran wouldn't sit in the same room. By round 3, they were face to face. J.D. Vance still flew home without a deal. The unresolved fault lines, Iran's nuclear program, the Strait of Hormuz, sanctions relief, frozen assets, every single one a red line for at least one party. Before those talks, Pakistan had already hand-delivered a 15-point proposal from Washington to Tehran on March 25th, then presented its own 5-point peace initiative. When that was rejected, it came back with a 45-day ceasefire framework. When that was modified, Pakistan carried the revised version. It is not functioning as a venue. It is the negotiating infrastructure, the only one keeping both sides connected when every other channel has gone cold. Then on April 26th, Trump pulled the plug mid-boarding. Witkoff and Kushner were preparing to fly back to Islamabad for a second round when Trump canceled. His words to Fox News, "I said, nope, you're not making an 18-hour flight to go there." Araghchi had already landed in Islamabad. He left, and then without any U.S. commitment, without any guarantee he came back. Iran's foreign minister returning to a city the Americans just publicly walked away from. That is the live state of this conflict. The U.S. is not in the room. Iran keeps showing up. The only explanation for that is Pakistan. Specifically, it is Munir. Because Araghchi isn't flying back to Islamabad for the building. He's flying back because the man who runs Pakistan has enough credibility with Tehran that Iran believes the process is still worth breathing. Meanwhile, Iran is sitting on 440 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% purity, minus confirmed by the UN's nuclear watchdog. 60% is a short technical step from 90%, which is weapons grade. That stockpile doesn't pause because diplomacy stalled. It accumulates. Every week the Islamabad process produces nothing as a week. That number grows without any framework containing it. Pakistan is the only actor in this conflict with active military and security ties to both Washington and Tehran at the same time. Qatar was struck by Iranian missiles. Oman is working the margins. China co-authored a peace proposal. Russia offered to take Iran's enriched uranium. None of them can do what Pakistan just demonstrated it can do: physically protect Iran's diplomats from Israeli air power. Then take a call from Trump the same week. Then send its army chief into Tehran 4 days after the talks collapsed. Pakistan did something like this once before. In 1971, it quietly opened the channel that brought Henry Kissinger to Beijing, the back door that unlocked US-China relations. That role stayed unacknowledged for years. This time, both Washington and Tehran recognized Pakistan almost immediately. That tells you how much higher the stakes are now, and how much more desperately both sides needed someone to trust. The flip in this title is not Pakistan switching sides. Pakistan didn't switch sides, it made sides irrelevant to its own position. Munir spent 18 months constructing a role that no ceasefire, no resumption of war, and no change of government in Washington or Tehran can easily replace. He built it from a terrorism arrest, a 4-day war, a Gulf Defense Pact signed 8 days after Israel crossed a line it had never crossed, and a fighter jet escort that kept Iran's negotiators alive when Israel wanted them dead. Every exit from this war, every realistic path toward a nuclear framework, a Hormuz resolution, a sanctions deal, runs through Islamabad now. Not because the world chose Pakistan, because Munir made Pakistan the only door that both sides would walk through. The question is what happens when that door is the last one left and neither side wants to open it. Because right now, With the US blockade holding, with 440 kilograms of enriched uranium sitting in Iranian facilities, and with Trump canceling flights on impulse, that door is not open. It is not closed. It is being held by one man in one city with no margin for error. Watch Islamabad, not the Strait of Hormuz, not the Situation Room. Islamabad is where this either gets solved or where the world finds out what happens when the last channel runs out of road.